right, welcome into the Big Hitters Only podcast. This is the Bill Belichick is the next head coach at UNC podcast. I'm recording this intro at 6:37 p.m. on Wednesday, December 11th. I pre-recorded with 4 different guests that you'll hear coming up on this podcast. I kind of want to do a quick intro. This is unbelievable. I still can't believe it. I'm watching CBS HQ as they talk about recruiting and Bill Belichick and his contract. Apparently 3 years, $30 million, which is more than they've ever paid a head coach. $30 million to $10 million a year. The commitment for football from an NIL perspective and all they need to make it happen. It's just crazy to say that Bill Belichick, arguably the greatest NFL coach ever, is now going to be in little old Chapel Hill coaching UNC football. It's a game changer for how UNC will be perceived as a football program. Could establish, we get into this a lot with some of my guests, kind of establish UNC moving forward as a power in terms of the infrastructure for recruiting and scouting and NIL and the commitment to football from the school and the administration. But our guests are as follows. Aury St. Germain, really good buddy of mine. Talk to him a lot throughout the week. Talk to him every day about UNC stuff and about life and whatnot. He listens to the podcast a lot. I think he's a good talker, provides a good perspective, a little bit of an outsider perspective as a fan, someone who's worked in athletics, and of course enjoys UNC football, NFL, and kind of gets the sport from a fan perspective. I then bring on the guests Mike Hardison joins first, gives his takes on the hire, and then we convinced Julian to come on. Julian, a couple days ago, said he would refuse to do a podcast if UNC hired Bill Belichick. He really wanted John Summerall and some of the more traditional hires, but he is on board and came on and chopped up with me for a little bit after Mike left. And then we bring on Joe Ovies, host of the OG podcast. Obviously covered Triangle Sports for almost 2 decades now. I talked to him more about the impact this will have from a media standpoint. Bill Belichick at ACC Media Days, Bill Belichick doing media on Mondays at UNC, questions, press conferences, how that could change in terms of what is required from coaches from a media standpoint, and then overall impact of Bill Belichick at UNC, worst case scenario, best case scenario, and chop it up with him in general, touching on that. This is exciting. It wasn't a very exciting season for UNC, and we stopped doing reaction podcasts, and it just wasn't a fun year from a UNC football perspective, but this is exciting. This is exciting off-year stuff. It's going to be fun to track the transfer portal, track NIL, track hires. It is a new era of UNC football, completely moves away from the Mac Brown era and brings in this whole different set of unknowns with Bill Belichick. I mean, you hire one of the best NFL coaches ever. It's going to completely transform, for better or for worse, what UNC football is for the next, 2 or 3 years, and then kind of sets the stage for what UNC football can be in the future. I'm super excited. I'm excited to go to the press conference. We'll do a podcast after the press conference, a reaction podcast, hopefully have a guest or two as well for that. So guys, rate, review, subscribe, follow, like on YouTube and Spotify and Apple, so you get these podcasts in your feed. I appreciate you listening, telling your friends, sharing stuff on social media, sending people links to the podcast and our social media clips, and just building this following. And please let us know if you have anybody that wants to be a local sponsor, interested in supporting us and allowing us to do this content and get to you better and faster. With all that being said, Bill Belichick is the next UNC football coach, and I hope you enjoy this episode. All right, welcome into Big Hitters Only. We have one of our most loyal listeners on now for a big podcast on Bill Belichick becoming UNC's next football coach. It is 2:38 on Wednesday, December 11th, and right now the word that's being used is that UNC is finalizing a contract for Bill Belichick to become the next head coach. I'm treating that, because I'm kind of on the news side of things too. I'm treating like it's going to happen. We're going to treat this podcast like it's going to happen or has happened. We're going to bring on multiple guests. Aury is the first one because he's going to provide. He's a kind of casual UNC fan, former SID, for UNC's baseball team. And I want to get his takes. He's been tracking it like we all have. Aury, what's up, man?
Good, man. Ross, how are you, man? It's good to be on the podcast that cracked my top 5 most listened in 2024, which not a big podcast guy, but for one that started in August,
Yeah.
kudos to you and the rest of the big hitters that
Funny enough,
jaunted it.
Yeah,
up
funny
into
enough,
my
I'm
top
trying to
5.
get Aury on a lot. We just got to find a good niche for him. And he was actually on the interviews for a lot of our interns who were in, like the guys we interviewed to be interns. Anyway, let's get to the news. All right, Bill Belichick, what a weird story.
A little hitter.
Yeah, what a weird story. I mean, this has been going on for over a week now. Inside Carolina wrote a story on Thursday that Bill Belichick had interviewed for the job. It actually was on the message boards Sunday morning after the NC State game, so over a week ago. And here we are Wednesday it's been like every day waiting for this to happen. What were your thoughts when you first heard that Bill Belichick might be UNC's next football coach?
I mean, I think I was like everybody else, right? I was like, no way, right? You heard Summerall, you heard Schumann, you heard all these names that traditionally are guys that UNC would probably bring in. Maybe, maybe you go a little bit. Matt Campbell, another one. I mean, you and Julian went through 25 different candidates, and there were a lot on there that seemed to make a lot of sense. Bill Belichick not being one of those. I think they were one of the first ones that you reviewed that you guys kind of dismissed pretty quickly.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. And so I was like everybody else, man. I was like, there's no way. And then, every day there's a little bit more. There's a little more. There's another crumble on Twitter, and then it starts building up. And it's like, oh man, this might happen, right? And even still to this day, I mean, we're finalizing the deal, and I still don't believe it yet, right? But who knows? I mean, if this is the way that Carolina chooses to move its football program in, they're all in, right? There's no question about they are committed to football. And I know that there's going to be arguments about if you were really committed, you would hire the young and up-and-comer. But let's cut to the chase. Obviously, Bill Belichick can win. He knows how to put together a program, an organization, his 400-page Bible. I assume, that there was some good stuff in there, but I don't know, man. It's crazy, but you can't say that they're not committed. I mean, how did it all start? Do you think was this a BOT plan?
Yeah.
So
I think we're gonna get what's gonna be good about this podcast. We're gonna get a lot of different perspectives from a lot of different people that are gonna come on, and we'll get to the BOT thing for sure. But I think it was initially an idea from John Pryor, the chair of the BOT. And look, I'm not treating this podcast, Big Hitters, as some journalistic endeavor. So everything I say may not be true. But from everything I'm reading on the message boards on Twitter, it was John Pryor wanted a big white whale type coach. And for some reason, Bill Belichick and maybe his agent wanted to get in the game of college coaching. So it was like a courtesy interview by Bubba and by the chancellor and maybe John Pryor. And then just from there, of course, Bill Belichick's going to be impressive. He's going to wow you. Apparently, he had a whole plan on NIL, on fundraising. He's been studying the game, understanding how it's evolved so much in the last 3 or 4 years where you have a payroll, essentially, a salary cap, and how players are ranked and how to recruit versus, NIL stuff and then the coaching side of things. And like you said, I've thought about it so many different ways. He is a great football coach. There's no doubting that. Right. So on the football side of things, you don't worry about that unless for the next 2 or 3 years. He's going to be able to improve your on-field performance and preparation and the week of the game day and week of game day operations and probably win you some games. It is the other side of things that have people concerned, the NIL, the recruiting. But he has this whole plan where he's going to have a whole recruiting staff that handles it a lot. And then they're going to have he's been a general manager for 20 years for the Patriots, so they're going to have a way to figure out the financial side of it as well. I think UNC just had to find the money. That was the delay. And that's where it's this might jumpstart UNC to take football more seriously. He's going to Bill Belichick's the kick in the ass UNC athletics and football needed to understand what it's going to take to win from an operation standpoint, from a money standpoint, from a staffing standpoint. And so maybe that's the kind of what we'll take from this in 3 or 4 years, that Bill Belichick made UNC serious about football.
Right. And there's no doubt that he's going to come in and develop and put together a structure that is going to be tight. It's going to be a well-run ship, and players are going to know what to expect pretty darn quickly, I would imagine, right? That he knows the ins and outs, the day-to-day, like you talked about the game week. I'm almost thinking about it from the other side, right? He has done all the general manager stuff. It's clear that the college football landscape is changing in that direction. Everywhere that you read, that's the place that it's going, right? And so I kind of start to worry a little bit about the personnel and the coaching side, right? Obviously, great head coach. He can win. There's no doubt about it. He fell off the last couple of years without Brady. And so there is a little bit of nervousness when it comes to putting together a game plan for me a little bit, right? And I don't know if that's necessarily a huge concern of mine. I think that there are little bits of place, there are places where there's some concern and there's some excitement kind of on both sides for me, right? And so I think that he can come in, he can develop that structure. He knows what a good football player is. He knows what a bad football player is. But you read the reports, right, of Deion Sanders, he doesn't even do home visits anymore, right? And so, like, who gives a shit, right? Yeah. If he doesn't go and recruit, Deion's obviously getting guys. Belichick's going to get guys too. I anticipate them to clean up in the transfer portal immediately. I was texting a buddy earlier. I mean, this is a hot take. You told me to bring my hot takes.
Yeah.
I think you win 8-9 games next year. You go to an ACC championship in 2026. Maybe you pull it off in a college football playoff, game in Chapel Hill in 2026. Mark my words, on December 11th of 24. Carolina is going to be hosting something here in December. And I think it's entirely possible. From the other side, right, it could be a complete train wreck, right? If this thing doesn't work in 2 or 3 years, you're in a world of hurt, because then you look like a complete doofus going with the 72-year-old. I don't know. You're swinging hard, and it's a big old uppercut.
It's a huge swing, and I think it's a huge financial commitment. Like, I think UNC had to find money. I think he had to get written agreements that we're going to have X amount for my coaching staff, X amount for recruiting. Yeah. Like, you have to build out this whole thing. If him and his coaches aren't going to do a lot of the recruiting, you have to have a staff that's breaking down film, finding the recruits, and then he's just putting the finishing touches on it. I think the recruiting aspect is interesting. You're going to have to find the right player who wants to play for Bill Belichick. It's going to be a different type of player than wanting to play for Mac Brown. Mac Brown's going to love on you. It's going to be safe. It's going to be cuddly, big teddy bear, fun, Jordan, Nikes, my rings.
And a whole bunch of losses?
Yeah, exactly. You're going to have to find a player who's like, I want to get to the NFL, and I want a serious coach who's going to prep me over the next 3 or 4 years, and a staff that knows what is needed for the NFL, and a nutrition staff, strength and conditioning staff. I don't want it to be run like a pro program. I think what really helped change the tides maybe for the popular public opinion on Belichick was his appearance on Pat McAfee. I know you're a big McAfee guy, along with Joe Rogan, saying how he's going to run an NFL prep program where everything is going to be targeted towards getting you ready for the NFL or in life, but it's going to be run like a professional program from the moment you get in there. Nutrition, strength conditioning, game planning, scheme, technique, everything's going to be targeted. So if you want to get NFL, I can see it being a great guy to play for, and that will help recruiting. I'm so intrigued. 100%. I think a big thing here, you're in Chapel all the time. You're around basketball program, football program. You work for the town of Chapel Hill to a certain extent. This is just so cool for the UNC community. I think there's going to be tons of national media there during the press conference, and if that happens, and just the attention.
Totally. And fans are going to show up, right? Fans are going to show up. But going back,
winning's the most important thing. Winning's the most important. You got to win.
There is.
Fans 100%. Will come if you win. Go ahead.
Yeah, fans will come at the beginning no matter what, right? It doesn't matter if they drop their first 2 next year. People are showing up to Keenan probably throughout next year, right? I would imagine, just based off of the name. After that, yes, you have to win. But going back to your recruiting point, right? Yes, there has to be specific, players that want to play for a guy like Bill Belichick. But the same thing can be said with Dabo Swinney, with Deion Sanders. Like, those are two very unique personalities in the college football landscape. And there's a lot of good players to go around, right? It's about picking and choosing the ones that fit inside of your program and the ones that are really focused on being NFL bound. Or, I know that he outlined in his McAfee, interview, just champions of business or life. And I know that is cliched, but it matters. It certainly does. And so I think that, you hit the road hard. Can you imagine just Bill Belichick just rolling up to Grimsley High School?
Yeah,
I mean,
that stuff's to be weird. I mean, can you imagine? Can you imagine seeing, like, how coaches go, like, a lot of football coaches go on walks. I know Dre Bly is always going on walks. Like, just seeing Bill Belichick on like a 2-mile walk during his lunch break, like around Chapel Hill, like through the quad. Oh well, like Chapel Hill is a small town, and like it's not Athens or Austin or even Ann Arbor or Madison, Wisconsin. Like, it's small town once you're in it, and like he is such a big personality. He's not like a big personality, but like a big persona. Dude, I've watched more ESPN in the last 3 or 4 days than I have in the last 3 or 4 months. And it's been, dude, I'll turn on and it's Jeff Saturday and Stephen A. Smith talking about UNC. And it's like, they'll do an NBA segment, 2 NFL segments. It's back to Bill Belichick and UNC. Same with Get Up. And it's been on.
I texted you on Sunday. I was watching the Fox NFL preview show. Yeah. Before any of the NFL talk, the first story at 11 a.m. was Bill Belichick to UNC. There's no doubt in my mind that it's going to bring all kinds of national attention. And that stuff is cool and fun and nice. And it's inevitable, obviously, at this point, assuming Belichick is the guy. But you got to sustain that. You sustain that with wins. So I'll be really interested. My prediction is it goes well. I'm really weird about the whole Steven Belichick thing, the whole head coach in waiting. That seems really odd. Why would UNC do something like that? Maybe they.
I think that's stupid from both perspectives.
Maybe I agree.
Like, why would Bill Belichick expect that to happen? It seems like a very dumb nepo thing.
It certainly is. And if that's the case, hire him as your DC. If he's a good DC at North Carolina, he's going to get an opportunity somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And so to tie the administration's hands of, and what is that? Just like a word like, hey, you promise you'll do this kind of thing? If they don't do it, what happens? I don't know. I think that part is a mess. I think the fact that Belichick here is enough. And so we'll see. We'll see how it plays out from there.
Yeah. So we'll get you out of here. Aury is a very important person, so we only have him for about 20 minutes. I think the ideal lasting situation here is that he, like I said, gives UNC football the kick in the butt it needs and sets up a operation and an infrastructure for football that the next coach can follow, and takes what Mac Brown built, because Mac Brown did do a lot of great things for the football program. Takes what Mac Brown built with facilities, the new weight room, new locker room, new training facilities, all that stuff, and builds on it with this kind of salary cap, NIL infrastructure, fundraising, pro development, advance the training and scheme and operation, so that the next coach, look, in 3 or 4 years, this isn't a long-term solution, can take that, and then UNC is set for kind of the SEC step it needs to take, around 2030 or 2036, whenever that happens. Because it is a short-sighted move. This is a short-sighted move by John Pryor and the BOT or whoever was pushing for this. It is not the realistic best long-term solution. That would be a Summerall or a Matt Campbell or is it Jeff Monken?
From Army.
Yeah.
Jeff Monken.
Those are the stable coaches that could probably get you 8 or 9 wins consistently. This is kind of, like you said,
But if you swing and hit it out of the park, if you win an ACC championship in the next 2 or 3 years, then you're not all the way back to square one, right? Like, even if he only has 2 or 3 good years in him, if they are good, you have a great opportunity to hire someone like a Summerall or someone else that maybe you might have swung and missed on this time around. Who knows? I mean, it seems. Go ahead.
No, I lost my train of thought there.
I do have one more question for you.
Go ahead.
How do you think this affects the rest of the athletic department, right? Because, if you, granted, Bill Belichick, a lot different than a lot of other coaches, right? But if you're Damon Nahas, right, just got hired as the women's soccer coach, or you're Scott Forbes, or you're whoever, whatever Olympic sport head coach, insert name, you see that these demands that have been made and then accepted, right? It's like, do you start if you're Bubba, do you just have coaches start walking into your office? Hey, I need this. Hey, I need this. I'm
Well,
sure that they do that now. And I understand that football is a whole different beast, right? But it cracks the door there, in my
well,
opinion.
I think it helps the athletic department because everything's trickled down from football.
It does.
So if you get, for example, if football gets $100 in NIL, it's all under one thing, old wall management. So in my mind, look, I'm not well versed in this, but let's say they get $100 donation. Football gets $90, basketball gets $5, and then the other people get the rest.
So you're not earmarking your donation for a specific sport?
You can.
Okay.
But there's also going to be people that say, look, I'm donating to old wall management, and y'all use it how you're going to use it.
Sure.
And there's revenue share coming as well. And I'm not as well versed in this, but look, I don't think women's soccer or field hockey or lacrosse have really struggled. I mean, they just won titles in both sports.
Right.
And they lose money. Every sport at UNC loses money, but football and basketball. So football is going to be king, and they need football to succeed for everything else to trickle down. It's no longer a basketball school. It's got to be a football school that makes a lot of money, sells tickets. Selling tickets is huge. And so that comes with winning. I think the big thing here, as we wrap this up, is recruiting. Belichick always had a good quarterback. Mac Brown always had a good quarterback. When Mac Brown didn't at UNC, they struggled. When Belichick didn't have a good quarterback, he struggled. It's very simple. You got to have good players. That starts with securing Bryce Baker, the 2025 quarterback who hasn't signed yet. It starts with figuring out the quarterback room and then building the offense. And they have 6 offensive linemen in transfer portal. Travis Shaw's in transfer portal. Starting linebackers in transfer portal. We're going to get more of that with hopefully Mike and Julian later in this podcast. But it starts with recruiting. And so you're banking that the NIL will come and that Belichick has a plan to land elite recruits and ramp up recruiting. I mean, the class was like 89th in the nation. And so they're going to have to hit the portal hard.
ECU was ahead, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Oh, dude, there were MAC schools ahead of UNC. Yeah.
Anyway. I mean, he's got some work to do, but I think that that's the place that he plugs in the best, right? I think that, Quinn Ewers stays at Texas. I've seen some March Man into UNC tweets. I mean, who knows? I mean, crazier things have happened. I mean, you wouldn't think that Bill Belichick would have ever came, right? At this point, anything's possible, Ross. Anything is possible.
I was chuckling. Dude, my life has been consumed by this on Twitter and message boards. I know you're not a big IC guy with the message boards, but dude, you've been reading those. It's like mind-numbing, but it's really Twitter. It's been funny too, like all the memes, the girlfriend stuff. I mean, I have so many people reached out to me, and then the group chats, and you're sending links everywhere. Yeah. But so it's been fun already.
What's your take on intergenerational relationships?
Dude, that's a whole other podcast. I can't imagine being 72 and trying to relate to a 24-year-old, but it's working, I guess.
I guess. It's a choice.
What does she move? Like, where does he live? I mean, I have so many questions. Does she move down, or she just stay wherever she is? Anyway,
I don't know.
All right. I think Aury's passed the test. We're going to have him on again for another type of podcast. And we thought about an any question, any topic type podcast. But Aury's electric. He's a good talker. We're going to have him on again. We appreciate his time. About 20 minutes here on the Big Hitters Only podcast. Thanks, man.
Cool. See you, Ross.
All right. Now we bring on Mike Hardison. You know Mike. He's made the most appearances on Big Hitters Only. Remember to rate, review, subscribe, follow, engage on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. We have Chip Patterson on the background talking UNC and Belichick. We hope to have Chip on later on this podcast. All right, Mike, we're having a bunch of people on. So there's someone before you coming on after you. I want you to take me through your progression of thoughts from when Belichick's name was first mentioned to where we are today, Wednesday, December 11th at 4:35 p.m. Still not official as we're recording.
Yeah, so I mean, initially I think everyone had kind of the same reaction, which was that this name is just being pushed by boosters, board trustees, that kind of and that it wasn't a very serious thing. I think that, I know on the last time we talked about this, me and Julian, we were big on Summerall, and, Matt Campbell was kind of like this would be awesome type candidate, and it had listed a few other names. That makes it sound like those were the guys initially. It felt like as the search kind of went on, this kind of got hijacked a little bit. Felt like Bubba was probably kind of undercut here, and Belichick's name kind of became a more real possibility as the search bore on. Had a positive interview. Seemed like, we're actually considering this guy. And suddenly, like, everyone else is turning us down, I think because of just how messy this search was, which I understand. And Belichick's our only candidate, really, that we are serious with. And sounds like as of, this afternoon that this is a near done deal, soon to be done deal. There's some, variance in reporting there. But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of as shocked as anyone, I think. I mean, this is
Hmm.
I kind of laughed that he was being considered in the first place. I have personal feelings on it where I've basically been, I think, taking, if you are letting go of a coach that's 73 years old and you feel is like kind of lost, it has hit the ceiling and hasn't been able to rise above it, and you kind of want to go in a different direction with the mindset being you're going to have a guy that can kind of build a program or, be there long term, then you hire a 72-year-old that has no experience coaching in college, no experience dealing with NIL, no experience with recruiting. I'm kind of head scratching. I will say,
Yeah.
I saw a buddy of mine on Twitter, Connor Lynch, put out a great tweet, which was, "This is like when you lose a few hands at blackjack and you get frustrated and you go all in. This is a swing for the fences here." And I will say, if Belichick can bring in, the boosters and the buy-in and finally convince UNC that it needs to go all in football, this might be a long-term positive move. And I think predicting and saying this is going to fail or this is going to succeed off the bat is foolish. I think you have to kind of think probabilistically. And so, like, going with a younger guy like Schumann or Summerall and giving them space and runway to be successful, I think has a much higher probability of long-term success. But I think if you outright say that Belichick can't succeed and say that this is totally going to be a failure off the bat, that would be foolish as well. So, not high on the hire. I do think this is probably gonna backfire, but there is high upside for it. So, super high
Yeah.
risk, super high reward.
Yeah. I mean, so the positives, I think there's a bunch of positives. I mean, he can coach football. Like,
Yep.
I think, there's not many people outside of like a Nick Saban and maybe 10 other coaches in the college and maybe some pro coaches that can probably get the most out of the roster and build a program with what it has. So like on the field, I feel good about, hey, if we can get a decent roster, he can coach them up to probably better than they would have with some other candidates. I feel good about like the infrastructure and operations and being better in game, things like that, better practices. What are your like positives when you like if you want to? I know you and Julian like seem to have a little bit, and a lot of people have. I mean, I think everybody
Yeah.
had like a little bit of a negative initial thought. You think about recruiting, you think about his age. But what are your positives when you think about what Bill Belichick can bring?
Media attention. I mean, it's
Yeah,
it's been a circus, right? Like, but you have UNC football being talked about on First Take and Sports Center and I mean, right behind you on television going on right now, right?
yeah,
Like, that hasn't happened in a while, especially towards Mac Brown's last couple seasons as we kind of stumbled out. I mean, Drake May brought attention, but that was a singular player that was a generationally good quarterback.
How
Good.
important is that though? How important do you think media? I was thinking about that because I think Andrew Carter had a tweet. Like, I know you've gone back and forth on Twitter, but like, what? How important is media attention? You think?
I think
Like,
it's important. It keeps us top of mind, right? Like,
yeah,
I mean, the closest analog we have is Colorado hiring Dion, right? And I
hmm
think they were kind of in a similar position that we were, which is, what is there else to lose?
yeah,
Right? Like, we saw the talent, we saw the product on the field this year. We went 6-6 with some ugly, like with some very soft competition, and then we just we let go of Mac Brown after 6-6 season. Like, clearly, like, the expectation is like we don't have the talent right now. The recruiting class is not great. Like, we haven't done anything in the portal yet. So the alternative, yeah, there you go. The alternative is like this is probably not going to be a great team to begin with next year. But you bring in someone like Belichick, and maybe he has sway. I mean, I am very skeptical that he's going to be able to go into a 17 or 18-year-old's home and like like be able to connect with them. But 6 Super Bowl rings do speak for themselves, and so that draws a lot. And you also have to think about like the number of people he's going to bring from a Patriots staff, from coaching circles, that type of thing, where that's going to have an impact.
yeah.
And so maybe the product is we will get you to the NFL, and I can do it because I'm the best coach of all time in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, I think UNC fans might not like to hear this, but I don't think we're that much different than Colorado. Maybe a better recruiting base,
Yeah.
but big state school, flagship school. I mean, there's probably a lot better recruits in Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina than Colorado, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico. So you have better recruitment. Outside of that, though, UNC is the same level as Virginia, a Colorado, a California, maybe like a Michigan State, like. So yeah, going like a home run, a hit. Like, what's there to lose? I think like bringing in a Bill Belichick, like you're not going to lose to like a Boston College or a Virginia. Like I think like he will like raise the floor to a part where like he's not going to lose these games that UNC shouldn't lose on paper.
He's a better X's and O's coach than Mac Brown. I think that is like undeniable. Yeah, like that's easy. But yeah, and way better in game. But like it just depends upon the talent, right? Like that is college football in a nutshell. That's all college sports in a nutshell. It's like, do you have the better players? And like for Belichick, who is going to be time limited, like how many seasons can he coach? 3, we think realistically, right? If
I think 3 or 4 would be like it's a very short-sighted hire. Yeah, so
yeah, I mean, so like he has to win now. He's got to go into the portal now and like go get people. And like I heard rumors and stuff like, oh, the quarterback that loses the Texas starting quarterback battle if Ewers comes back, could be on the transfer market in the spring. And it's like we got to stop thinking like that. We got to go get people now. Like
so that I've seen that rumor. Obviously, Arch Manning you're talking about. So I didn't even realize Ewers could come back. Yeah, that'd be crazy. Yeah, I'm so interested to see how recruiting goes because you said Deion Sanders doesn't go into homes. He doesn't do like in-person visits. I'm interested to see, and I've read this a little bit or seen about how Belichick expects to do it. He might have a whole staff that their whole job is recruiting and scouting high school prospects. And I'm sure Belichick has like the final approval, maybe on offers and maybe on who they take, and maybe seals the deal on campus. But I don't think he's going to waste much time on that. He's going to have a whole staff that does that with a general manager, a sitting college GM, and then the in-game game week stuff, practices, preparation, scouting the opponent. That's going to be him and his son and his staff from college and the pros. So I'm interested to see how that changes. And that may be where the benefit of hiring Bill Belichick changes the format and the operations of UNC football long term. All right, we have Julian coming in. I'm going to let him in. Mike's got to leave us.
It's going to be good. I'm excited for this this reaction.
Mike, you got what, 10 minutes left maybe?
Yeah, like 5 minutes, yeah.
Okay, so we'll do a little transition here. Mike, Julian coming in right now. All right, welcome in, Julian Council. We went about 15 minutes with Mike. Julian said he would not talk about the hire if it was Bill Belichick. We'll let Julian go off for a little bit, let Mike bounce back and forth with him. Mike will head out, and then it'll be me and Julian for another 10 minutes. All right, Julian, I want your rant on what you think of this hire. And let's treat it like, look, we're treating like this is going to happen. The title of the podcast is Bill Belichick is UNC's new head coach. It's not official as we're recording right now, but I see reported that is in the process of being finalized. Julian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, that is true. I did say I had no interest in coming on this show if it was going to be Bill Belichick. And that was on Sunday. And quite honestly, I've gone through the 5 stages of grief. I went through like denial. I went through bargaining, being like, okay, like if it's Belichick, at least that means they're going to invest. I went through depression probably before I even went through bargaining. I went through a lot. And I'm here at acceptance because it's happening. I love Carolina football. And let me go ahead and get on board. Like what I didn't like about this from the beginning was it felt like a departure from the process that Carolina had laid out, looking for a coach who was under 50, that had been a proven winner in college, who potentially could be the long-term option in Carolina. Like that's what I wanted. And it's not to say that Belichick can't have success in Carolina, that Carolina, not the Panthers, the Tar Heels can't go out here and invest in the proper way in order to win big time at football. I was just hoping for someone like a John Sumrall or a Matt Campbell, who by all accounts, the Carolina could have hired if it wasn't for one board of trustee who's just hijacked this entire search. And that will always be disappointing to me, no matter how things play out, because we know Bill Belichick's not a long-term option. And when you're having conversations about hiring somebody and also succession plan at the same time, maybe those aren't the conversations you should be having. But all that being said, this is probably, especially where they're sitting right now, where it has not been announced, but clearly he's going to be the head coach, probably the best thing that Carolina can do as of right now, considering where the calendar is with the portal, where they are with guys leaving, and where things are headed in college football. And he laid out that plan of how he felt like Carolina could be a championship program, which we have all wanted to see for a long time. And at the end of the day, that's all you and I and everybody else who cares about this university, whether he attended or not, wants to see out of this football program. I'm dying to see it. And if this is finally Carolina deciding that, you know what, we know that we need to get serious about it, with rev share and NIL being a massive piece of this moving forward, and that we need to be more of a professionalized NFL type of run program, then good. If it took hiring 72, soon to be 73-year-old Bill Belichick to wake up people, to get the money out of these boosters' pockets, to finally take this sport seriously, then I'm all in. I was going to be all in at the end of the day anyways, unfortunately, because I'm a sicko, but I'm all in on this. And I don't know whether it's going to work out, because it's still Carolina football, and we found ways to mess it up plenty of times throughout the years. But it looks like he's going to put the infrastructure with the financial backing for this to be a program that's serious, that can compete with the big boys, and maybe finally do what we hope they could do and actually go out there, win an ACC championship and be competitive and go to the playoff in the coming year. So that's really my overall thoughts on the situation, aside from like plenty of questions I still have once he gets hired and how that looks like moving forward in Chapel Hill.
I asked Mike to give me his positives. I would ask Mike now, what are your concerns? And then Julian, what are your concerns? Like, what worst case scenario, like how could this go wrong in the next 2 years, next 2 or 3 years? Like,
that the status around him and the legend of Bill Belichick is largely built upon Brady. We find out the hard way, and then that doesn't translate to recruiting and NIL. Kind of, it doesn't translate into bringing good kids in and good talent in. And so he goes out in the field, and there's some X's and O's improvement, maybe over Mac, but he just doesn't have the talent. And so, I mean, the really worst case thing that you'd see, if he implodes quickly and it's like a 3-9 season next year, and this is easy to say, okay, we're pulling the plug, then okay, cool. The worst case in my mind is just this continued 6-6, 7-5 purgatory, where we continuously hear from this like mid-70s coach, hey, next year's when it's all going to come together. And, like, just let me get my plan in place. Let me get the structure in place. Like, we don't have – you at 72 years old, you do not have the runway. Like, you are rapidly approaching when to call it quits. And, like, the concern is, like, is this a guy that's having a late life crisis that's past his prime, trying at one last gasp to, make himself relevant again? I mean – You're not being the allegations of having a late life crisis when you're dating a 24-year-old, for God's sake. Like, right. I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, right? Like, he is a 6-time Super Bowl champion, like, coach under Parcells, like, undeniably one of the greatest coaches of all time. But, like, he was one of the greatest coaches of all time 20 years ago. Is that going to translate today?
Yeah, I want to go back to get to Julian's take on this too, but like I think what wowed the Bubba or Lee Roberts is that 400-page Bible of demands, the breakdown of the whole structure, his like studying, and him like what really could shock UNC into like this is what we should be doing, and Belichick kind of telling them in the interview, like interviewing them, saying like this is what I need, this is what y'all need, this is what has to happen for it to be successful. Julian, what do you think could go wrong? Like what are your I know some of your concerns, but anything else you think that could be an issue with Bill Belichick in the first 2 years?
Well, I mean, there are some whole ass suckers because obviously Bill Belichick's going to impress you in an interview. He's been sitting there for the last year putting together his manifestos, plans for his next opportunity, whether it's going to be in the NFL and college. And he is a 6-time Super Bowl winning head coach. He should impress you. It should not be like, oh, man, wow. Look at this guy. He's got his ducks in a row. Look at this. Crossing his T's, dotting his I's. Like, come on, guys. So, like, yeah, obviously, I did not really, like, they want to interview him the first time. No problem. Like, the in-person interview, it's kind of crazy not to because it is Bill Belichick. He's interested in your program, the things that you should do. I just didn't think just the way that they had laid things out as far as who they were targeting, it made a lot of sense. But here we are. My concerns obviously are age. Like, how long can he stick around? We have seen Bill Snyder and Joe Paterno and Bobby Bowden all coach until their 80s, and Belichick's going to be 73 next fall. So it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility for a guy who doesn't really look that old. I mean, I know he's 72, but he doesn't look like 72.
Dude, funny you say that. I was looking at Getty photos for the cover art. There were some photos where he looks rough on Getty.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, there's some he looks younger, but like he does look so old.
Well,
Sorry, continue.
Mac, God love him, look weathered at the end of it.
Yeah.
And it's quite possible that we're looking at Belichick after an embarrassing loss at Virginia Tech in the same way as a top 10 Carolina team. But, I mean, it's possible. Like, that's the copium in me being like, hey, maybe he could go up until he's 84 and he's going to build a dynasty the next decade in Chapel Hill. Recruiting comes to mind. There was all the negative recruiting on Mac. But you think about it, how can you negatively recruit Bill Belichick? Like, he's just going to show you 6 Super Bowl rings. The parents are going to know who he is. I do wonder if the kids are going to know, because as much as you would like to think that these kids watch football and are into it like we are, they're not. So they don't do their history. It's not like they're learning about Bill Belichick in school and paying attention, but they should know. At least their parents should let them know. And the 6 Super Bowl rings will help. But can he sit there and talk to a high school junior right now and tell him, I'm going to be like Kendra Harrison. Can he tell Kendra Harrison that he'll be his coach in the 3-year career that he has in Chapel Hill? Maybe. Will Kendra care? I don't know. And people talk about it's transactional and all that, but like, relationships matter. And we're seeing a lot of guys go in the portal here and who are with Mac because they don't have those coaches anymore. And maybe they'll jump right back to Carolina like Austin Blasky has. Maybe they would be insane, personally, the players on the current team to transfer out when Bill Belichick's going to be your coach, even if you're only staying for like a year or two. Like, that's insane to me. But I just wonder recruiting. But also, you think about it, how can you not say yes to Bill Belichick?
Yeah. Let me jump in here. So, Austin Blasky, the starting center, Georgia transfer, took his name out of the transfer portal. And I've seen his dad at tailgates. He wears a cowboy hat. He's the only guy tailgating at UNC in a cowboy hat, boots, and jeans. I'm sure his dad was like, you are staying to play for Bill Belichick.
For sure.
And then on the recruiting part, you touched on it, Julian. Like, it is more transactional now, and I guess relationships do still matter. They matter less than they did 5 years ago. And I think that's why Bill Belichick took the job, or why there's less concern there. Because if UNC has the financial backing, they can pay for these guys.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's going to.
I don't know if I necessarily.
I'm out.
Yeah.
Keep going, Julian.
See you,
Mike.
See ya.
Ross, I don't know if I necessarily agree with it doesn't matter as much nowadays. Like, okay, we just saw Carolina basketball lose out on AJ DeBonsa. And like, he had already signed at BYU, which is just insane that his parents kept up the dog and pony show and kept going to Alabama and UNC and going through these visits when they had already signed up a school. But he talked about to Matt Norlander and CBS Sports that he had a great relationship with BYU. And the other 2 schools, Alabama and Carolina, were willing to pay him $5 million. The Athletic does a great article every year just about talking about the players who transfer in college football and basketball and asking them, hey, why did you transfer? And they talk about, well, they wanted to get some money, but why did you choose a certain spot? And guys say, I'll take less money to go somewhere where I feel more comfortable, where I feel like that's where I land. So while, yes, it is more transactional, I mean, in the NFL too, in the NBA and pro sports in general, like, you want to get paid a lot of money, but you want to be somewhere where you feel like you have guys that care about you, like you like the relationship there, because you're going to have to work with them. It's a working environment, no different than anything else in life. You don't want to go work somewhere where yes, you can get the money. You don't want to be somewhere you're uncomfortable at, especially if you can get the same kind of offer somewhere else or something that makes sense for you. So we'll see. Like, I do think that he probably can recruit, and it's just a question I have. And it's a question I would have had they landed Matt Campbell, who has not been at his program where they could get the kind of talent that you can get at Chapel Hill. And I wondered, like, whether he would be able to handle NIL in the portal the way that I hope Carolina will handle it moving forward to Bill Belichick. And I also wondered whether there'd be the financial backing. Like, I don't have any questions about the financial backing. I do still have questions about the portal, especially when you look at Carolina's going to need defensive linemen. Are you going to beat Oklahoma out for those guys? You're going to beat Alabama and Ole Miss and Oregon and teams that are in the playoff for those big-time players? Because it's not just throwing money at them. It's also going to matter about development, especially if you're looking at a guy who's like going into like his junior or senior year, and this is like his last chance. And maybe that's what gets them to come here instead of going somewhere like the highest bidder in a place where they might go to the playoff when they could think about, oh, maybe I can go to the NFL if I go play for Belichick in that scheme.
Yeah, I saw that video. It was going around. I think it was on the message boards. It was an NFL reporter, and he's like, "Yeah, a guy who's a fringe sixth or seventh round pick can go to UNC for his junior senior season, and with the development and the NFL stuff at UNC, boost up to a fourth round pick, or vice versa, with a third round pick can get up to a second round grade with the help of Belichick's development and that whole process that he talked about on the McAfee show." I think that's an interesting element too for development. Like they may not get that 5-star or that high paid transfer, but with everything he's bringing in development wise, maybe get those players to play at a higher level. I'm interested to see the staff. Like,
yeah,
I think I would want him to hire like some experienced local college coaches, like, you know, guys that can navigate Georgia and Tennessee, or not Tennessee, North Carolina, Virginia, and know how to recruit at the college level. I don't know. Is that the path? Or you just go all NFL? I think you keep guys like Lonnie Galloway. Like I'm friends with Dre Bly, but I'm not thinking like Dre Bly, but someone who he was brought in as a recruiter who could recruit the Tidewater area. Someone who can all right, I can go get you players. I don't need a coach. I can be the recruiting guy. I think that's going to be a key part. I'm wondering if he has those connections and will hire those guys, or we will stick with guys he knows from NFL and from college.
Yeah, I'm sure he has those connections. Clearly, as connected. I mean, come on, it's Bill Belichick. He's going to know people from all aspects and walks of life in football, so he can get that staff. I'm very curious about the setup. Is it going to be like an NFL personnel department where you have that general manager, you have that college scouting director, and all those folks who are constantly looking out at high school talent and going out and making those relationships? Now, it's different. There's not a draft. You actually have to get them to agree, and you have to sometimes grovel for them to come to your school. So they're going to have to get relatable people. And I don't love the idea if it's talking about getting some of this form of coaches like a Joe Judge or like a Josh McDaniel or Matt Patricia, where every stop they had, their players hated them. Like they can maybe coach, but they should not be on the road trying to go out there and recruit kids. I'm very curious to see what the setup will be, if that's exactly what they want to do. Coaching wise, like X's and O's is not any concern of mine. I know that the offenses in the last couple of years in New England weren't great. The quarterback play also wasn't great. And I think Carolina, if they can get the right kind of offensive coach and someone who's coached NFL quarterbacks, look, Dowell Loggins just got the App State job. That's somebody who was a horrible OC with the Bears and Jets in the NFL, and he did a great job with Spencer Rattler, who's now in the NFL, and he did a great job this past season with Lenore Sellers. So even if they don't succeed at that level, we've seen one of the worst OCs like the last decade come to the college level and have a high level of success with two pretty talented athletes in Rattler and Sellers down there in Columbia. So I'm not going to sit here and say that McDaniels can't have success here if, say, they get Bryce Baker, if he eventually comes, or if they go in the portal and get somebody. I do think they'll be able to coach these guys up to the point where they're going to get good enough quarterback play and good enough play across the board to be a competitive team. It's just, will they end up having the kind of talent you need? Because you can coach them up, which is great, but you have to have those kind of difference makers in order to really win big, especially in this playoff era. And you're going to look and see. It's going to be Oregon, it's going to be Georgia, it's going to be those kind of Texas, those kind of teams are likely going to be in the Final Four. Those are the teams that acquire the most talent, and it's still a talent acquisition game. So I'm very interested to see if they can get that talent, acquire that talent via high school, and then supplement it via the portal with a coach who's going to be at his age.
Yeah, I'm not too excited about Josh McDaniels. He was so hated at the Raiders. It just doesn't seem like he's. I mean, I'm sure they can find someone that can do a little better than that. Okay, what about backing up a little bit to this search?
Sure.
I think Bubba, man. If I was him, I would
resign.
I would resign, leave his job, and go take a better job where he has the control of hiring people. Because he didn't hire Mac Brown initially. That was a booster hire. He wasn't able to hire the basketball coach. That was Roy Williams pushing Hubert Davis. He didn't have to hire a baseball coach. They Mike Fox promoted
Scott Forbes.
Scott Forbes. I know you knew that. His only hire truly has been Courtney Banghart. He didn't hire the women's soccer coach or the field hockey coach. So this, I thought this was going to be his hire. Like we talked about, this is going to be his hire. John Summerall, Matt Campbell, even Momkin, or just go out and get this is going to be my trademark hire. And it wasn't. Behind the scenes, your thoughts, you talked about it initially, but What do you think's going on in his mind? This has been the weirdest search to follow, and it's like I don't even know. I went at 30-30 for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's been a mess, and when you're being compared to Auburn, that's not a good thing. As
Or
Auburn
Tennessee
has
in 17.
Yeah, I mean, Tennessee, alignment really has been the issue with Tennessee and of Auburn in some of those searches. And you've seen Tennessee now since the fans revolt. And I was working in Nashville at that time and covering that search. So I know just how crazy it was. Like John Curry, who's now the Wake Forest athletic director, basically going rogue, but also just trying to do his job and hire Mike Leach. And he gets fired. There was talk about getting...
Wasn't it Schiano? Yeah,
Schiano,
Schiano, right?
No, it was Schiano, but then they revolted, and he's like, okay, well, if you don't want them, I'm going to go get Mike Leach. You need to even tell Bev Davenport, who was assistant president at the time, he's going to do that. So then they fire him. They end up elevating Phil Fulmer, who for the second time in Tennessee history in athletic department went out there and went full Brutus and stabbed somebody in the back. Go look up how he got the job from Johnny Majors, folks, for some nice history lesson about who Phil Fulmer is and how things have worked out in Tennessee. But since then, after Pruitt did not work out, they've gotten Danny White as their athletic director. They've already had Rick Barnes around. They got Josh Heupel. They go and get Tony Vitello on the football side, and they're all aligned. Everyone from the assistant president to the chancellor to the AD to the coaches are all on the same page. And Tennessee has won a baseball national championship. They're in the playoff. They're number one in basketball. Alignment is key. Auburn, continually a mess because they're not aligned. Now, basketball-wise, they're doing well. Bruce Pearl. Baseball's not great right now. Football, we see what's going on with Hugh Freeze. And constantly are always fighting. And Carolina, I'm concerned. For Bubba, I don't know if I would want to be in a situation after I have a board of trustee who tried to audit me back in the spring, illegally, mind you, because they couldn't do that as a private session. And then now he's going around trying to hire the coach. And I had a plan of trying to get Summerall or Campbell. It depends what his ego is, if he's someone who really cares whether he made the hire or not, or if he wants to be a part of this mess in Carolina. But this would not be a good thing for the university moving forward. For someone like John Prayer to stay in that chairmancy of the board of trustees and to have anybody conduct themselves on the board the way that he did. There needs to be alignment across the board, or you're going to have issues like you've seen at schools like Auburn and like Tennessee for 15 years until they finally got their act together the last couple of years. And now look at them. They're dominating.
Yeah, and there's clearly tension there between Pryor and Bubba, and look, they forced out Kevin Gustowitz too, who I was a great chancellor. That I think he got big athletics, but also had that academic side as being a former professor and a fundraiser and a doctor at UNC. And then I like Bubba a lot. I think he does really enjoy the 28 sports, and maybe not as big on big football as he needs to be, but I think he's a really good guy and a really good AD. So it's just a messy deal. I think it was a little embarrassing the way the search has gone. It's still not over.
Very embarrassing.
We're still here Wednesday evening at 5 p.m. waiting for the official word. Man, I thought we would get this text and this email from UNC on Monday, and I've been on my phone and message board so much. All right, Bill Belichick. Anything else you want to talk about? A quarterback. You would just hope that some of these guys come out of the transfer portal, and then we go get some talented guys. I hope that Bryce Baker comes on. What else are you thinking about when you think about kind of Bill Belichick the first 2 weeks of his tenure?
Yeah, well, I'm looking at it right now. So Monday is when the portal opened. And understand this, and I just want people who have been out here saying he's just going to get a ton of talent instantly. Schools like Oregon and Georgia and Texas, all these schools, like Duke, they just got Darian Mensah from Tulane that quickly. Do you think Darian Mensah took a visit to Duke immediately without the expectation he was going to commit there? They obviously tampered with him. These schools have been tampering for months with these players, and they already have a head start. So I don't love where Carolina's sitting right now as far as looking at next year in talent acquisition. Now, they can still get players. There's going to be guys on playoff teams that may transfer afterwards. There's going to be transfers in the spring, even though I'm very leery of spring transfers, whether did they lose that job and now they're going elsewhere. So I look at that. I really would need them to be able to get this whole situation figured out. And as far as the staff in place, I'm just curious how quickly can you be on the trail getting Bryce Baker and Austin Alexander, also the other guy who's a commit who has not signed, to decide they want to come to Chapel Hill. And then how quickly can you bring in some of these portal guys, as there will be a dead period at the end of the month. So there's not much time to have them visit. There's other guys I mean, Eli Sutton, Jordan Louis, Zach Greenberg, Caleb Hood, Connor Harrell, Andrew Rosinski. Maybe not Rosinski, but those first 5, like, they're not coming back to Chapel Hill as far as guys in the portal. Rosinski, I think it would behoove him to come back here as a guy who's a 4-star freshman out of Georgia. Amari Campbell as well, like, would behoove you to come back to work with one of the great defensive minds in the history of the game, Aiden Banfield. And that's a guy who might be getting a bag elsewhere, but I would think, like him, Travis Shaw, Howard Sampson, we already saw Blasky. I don't understand any of these guys that played on the team last year who actually started, wouldn't want to come back here and get an opportunity to work under Bill Belichick. I mean, the money. But of these guys, who's really getting paid? Banfield,
Travis
probably.
Shaw. I think Howard Sampson was starter, right? Starting left tackle.
Yeah, I mean, left tackle market, that will pay you. Defensive tackle market, Shaw has not really been a good player, but there will be a high market because of his body type, his 5-star rating. Like Keyshawn Silver's back in the portal, and he didn't do much at Kentucky. Like Banfield, he's a guy who played at Mill Creek High School, which has been a good program in the state of Georgia, so maybe he can get paid. Maury Campbell, I saw 247, at least when I looked at it on Tuesday, he was the highest rated linebacker in the portal. So maybe they get paid. But it sounds like Carolina's
going to get paid. Also get paid coming back to UNC.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
Carolina's going to have the money.
Travis Shaw was getting paid by UNC already. He was on like a salary at UNC. I know that sort of stuff. But like Howard Sampson could have – these guys, I think it's good. It's good business sense to go in the portal, see what your market is.
Yes.
Get some offers. And then, look, it doesn't close for another 2 weeks. Or you can come back, closes after Christmas. You can come back if you want to, have time to meet the coaching staff. So these guys can come back in. And then – I didn't even think about the portal opens again in the spring, right? After spring practice.
Yeah, for like 15 days or something like that.
So that's gonna be key for UNC. Because even though they'll miss spring practice, that will be a huge time to get players who think they can move up from a lesser school, or if they're not they're too deep or starting, they can move down and come to Carolina.
Well, I'll say this. Damian Martinez, who was at Oregon State, was going to stay at Oregon State. Then Miami tampered, bottom off their roster. He came in the spring. Derek Harmon, defensive tackle at Oregon, number 1 team in the country. He's been a starter, been really good for them all year long. He was going to stay at Michigan State. Oregon tried to pay him off in December. He said no. After spring, he came over. There are guys you can go tamper with and buy off a roster. So they may potentially put themselves, they're already a week behind, because whenever you get the staff in place, you're going to be behind. You can still find a way after it's all said and done in the spring to go out there and go steal a kid if that's what they need to do. And by all means necessary. That's what everybody's doing out here who's trying to win games. And Carolina apparently is getting that big boy business when it comes to trying to finally get things done football-wise, which excites me. I think just on the surface, it's absurd. Whether it's a good or a bad absurd, it's absurd that Carolina's about to hire Bill Belichick.
It's crazy.
Like, how the hell is that even possible? It's absurd because of the age. It's absurd because of what he's accomplished. It's absurd because it's Carolina football and this is all happening. But I think, and in the end of the day, it's a good thing, whether it works with him winning or not, because Carolina decided we're going to get serious about this and we're going to invest. And my hope is that whether he wins or loses, that the next guy gets the same kind of treatment financially with the buy-in and from the fan base that it takes to be a big boy football program. That's really where I sit at this point in time. I think it's all absurd. I hope it works out. I have my questions about it. It won't be dull, and you don't have to worry about playing on the CW anymore.
Yeah, dude, it's so crazy. Like I multiple times this week, I've just been like, God, this is wild. Like I can't believe this happened, because it was like a slow build and slow progression. And we've been kind of texting all during it. Like first Aury, who came on earlier, he was like, y'all mentioned his name, but it was the first name you mentioned, and it was a throwaway name during our podcast that me and you did with all the names. Yeah, and that podcast has been our most listened to on YouTube, by the way. Good job.
Cool.
And then so that it just built and built. It was like, is this serious happening? And then it went national when Inside Carolina posted the article of the interview, and then it built over the weekend. And then, dude, I've gotten texts from people I haven't heard from, in years. I'm sure you've gotten that too. Like people that never want to talk sports, never hit you up for anything, and all of a sudden they know that you're into college football, into UNC sports, and they hit you up. It kind of shows the interest level.
Well,
Certainly
Ross,
a broader eye.
it went from like text being like, I'm sure you did the same thing, telling these people, yeah, like, okay, he interviewed, but it's not like serious, to being like, actually, no, never mind, it is serious. Like, oh, they're gonna hire him. So like that's the progression you're talking about right there.
It's been the weirdest story to like kind of break with intel, like checking the updates on IC. Yeah, you're right. Like this was just, I mean, the first text were like, all right, this is just the board of trustees to satisfy a white whale, a really elite coach, just to kind of check it off, and then they're going to go after Summerall. And then it became more and more serious. Like, gosh, there's mutual interest, and he really wowed them. It's just nuts, man. Well, we'll have something fun to talk about next year if this podcast keeps rolling. Julian, I appreciate your time. Anything else? Anything else we get off your chest? You got a good little rant from you, but it seems like you come around. I liked how you went through your progression of where you went with this decision as well.
Yeah, and look, I feel like we all should be allowed to kind of think this out and kind of go through emotional like roller coaster that this still is, even though we feel like it's over. But yeah, I did not expect this to be the case. I really was hopeful that Carolina was going to go after someone like Summerall or land Matt Campbell, which apparently could have happened had John Prayer not done what he's done. And that still is disappointing to me because I think Matt Campbell, like, while there's going to be plenty of people who look at this as a revolutionary hire for Carolina and are going to praise it, there are going to be plenty of people who are going to lambast the hire. Not a single person. And that doesn't matter, the opinions of people, even if we are out here in the opinion business, but not a single person other than like fans who don't understand the history of Iowa State football, which, I mean, why should they? And if they don't respect their opinions. But those are the only people who would have hated the Matt Campbell hire. For Carolina to land him when the Lions couldn't do it, the Detroit Lions, by the way, folks, and that Ohio State couldn't do it, but for North Carolina to land this guy, he could have been your coach forever because he clearly is somebody who did not want to go to a pressure cooker situation and want to go somewhere where his family could feel safe and relax and he could win, and this was going to be it. Like, that's still disappointing to me, even with the excitement that this is going to bring to the program. I don't care about ratings and eyeballs. I care about wins and losses, and that's what I want to see Bill Belichick and whoever coaches this team, if it doesn't end up being him, bring to Carolina, and I think he can do it. And we'll see how long it lasts, and it won't be dull, that's for sure. And I, again, cannot believe we're here.
Yep. All right, appreciate your time, Julian. All right, welcome into the Big Hitters Only. First appearance for this big hitter, a podcast host. You may recognize the name, Joe Ovies. What's up, man?
What's going on, man? I'm a little, it's been a day. It's been a day today.
Yeah, I was looking at the last time you texted you. It was in September. Yeah, it's been a wild couple days and a week, 10 days. So Bill Belichick, official now. I got Jonathan Jones in the background here on CBS HQ. We had Chip Patterson in the background earlier. It's a who's who of Carolina media now talking. I want to do a little bit different angle here with Joe talking about Bill Belichick as UNC's next head coach. We had Aury on, and then we had Mike and Julian on before Joe. Joe, what does this mean for the Triangle and the media and the attention that this is going to bring to UNC, to the ACC, and to this area for football and athletics? Like, what's your big picture take on what next year is going to be like from a media attention standpoint?
If I'm Jim Phillips, ACC commissioner, I am renegotiating the television contract right now. And I tell Florida State you can't get any of the extra money. No, I'm kidding. No, look, man, we all know what Deion was able to bring to Colorado. And I don't know if Bill has the same attention that Deion gets, because when we talk about Deion, we get into all sorts of other non-football matters. If you catch my drift, it becomes more of a cultural discussion sometimes. So Bill's really going to be more of an NFL football fascination more than a cultural fascination. I'm not saying that is good or bad. I'm just saying it's different than what you got at Deion, but the effect should be the same. Every Bill Belichick televised game is going to be a big deal. They're going to talk about North Carolina and Bill Belichick on College Game Day. Pat McAfee and his relationship with Bill Belichick is obviously going to help North Carolina. The question that I have is, for how long? That's not too dissimilar to the questions we had about Deion Sanders. How long was he going to be at Colorado, given that his kid was only going to be there for so long? Shedeur Sanders is going to go off to the pros, right? So my question now is, how long is Bill Belichick going to be there? If we had the same questions about Mac Brown, and that was a big liability for Mac Brown, well, then you're going to say the same thing about Bill Belichick. As of this recording, I don't know what the situation is with the contract. I don't know what the stipulations are with Steven Belichick. Remember, that was something that was floating out there, the defensive coordinator at Washington now, that he would be on staff. He'd be the coach in waiting. Did UNC agree to that? Again, it's, 5:45 in the afternoon. Adam Schefter just reported it. I'm not quite sure what the details are with that. So we'll find that out relatively soon. So I just don't know how long he's going to be there, or if it even matters, if the juice is worth the squeeze to show to the next coach that they're that serious about football. Because that, to me, is the biggest story here. Not Bill Belichick. Carolina being the team that does this, being the school that does this. Not Bill going back to college. That Carolina is the school that he's going to.
Yeah, we've seen UNC and Bill Belichick mentioned on ESPN almost every day. All the big shows. Stephen A. Smith talking about it. Get Up with Greenberg. It's crazy attention already. And look, if he starts winning, like you're thinking about game day, coming to Chapel Hill, just because of the Bill Belichick connection, it's crazy the impact 8-time Super Bowl champion has already had. And when it actually starts happening, like I can't imagine the press conferences and just like the changes he brings to UNC football. What do you think is the ideal, like, best case scenario of this tenure of the Bill Belichick era at UNC? Like, what's the apex mountain?
You got to make the college football playoff, man. I mean, that's what this is about. You got to make the college football playoff. You have, theoretically, the greatest coach of all time now coaching your program. And he wants to revolutionize the way he goes about college athletics, making it more of a pipeline to the NFL. The idea being you're going to get such talent that you're going to go out there and win. As Joe Giglio, my co-host, likes to say, you're not going to look at North Carolina and say you're going to lose games because of your head coach. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think on the field, X and O's, game prep, scouting opponents, that is greatly improved. Like a 73-year-old Mac is far from a 72-year-old Belichick in terms of everything football related on the field.
The questions that I have, though, and I'm not trying to rain on this. I mean, look, man, I'm welcoming the content gold mine that awaits us.
It's unbelievable
with Bill Belichick. And I know there's a lot of Carolina fans that have been kind of coming at me about, I don't like the way you've been talking about this. And I want to make it abundantly clear. I want Bill Belichick at North Carolina because I'm not an idiot. Let me drink from the SEO fountain, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I'm here for it. I'm here for the triangle dynamics. I love that this stuff goes into a circus mode, right? But I do think it's fair to ask some questions. And let's be honest about Bill Belichick. Let's be honest about his talent evaluation, where we saw some misses coming out of college in the draft without Tom Brady being there to be your security blanket. Let's also not forget that it wasn't like Bill Belichick was enamored with Drake May. And again, I'm not trying to make this a thing. I'm just simply pointing out that you can go back on YouTube. You can go look at the clips. It's not like Bill Belichick was enamored with Drake May. Are you telling me he would not have had Drake May as quarterback at North Carolina? Is that what you're telling me? Was there somebody better than Drake May out there who a lot of NFL people tell you are the real deal, that Patriots fans are all in? Was Bill Belichick's pettiness the reason why he did not want to give the Patriots credit for drafting Drake May? These are all, I think, legitimate questions. So are you able to properly evaluate the talent that's in the portal to get you to win? And then there's the other factor, too. It's one thing dealing with guys like Tom Brady, Rob Gronkowski, actual professionals that are at a level. You don't make the NFL by accident. But the pool of talent in college is so spread thin, and you don't know what goes on a college campus. And look, Ross, I mean, I know it's been a long time since you and I have been on a college campus, but let's go back in time and think about the days where your boys were completely thrown off because the girl broke up with them, right? Or some sort of drama was taking place, right? So those are the things that I'm really curious to see how Bill Belichick handles. And he can say that he's buffering himself with like 2 staffs and all that stuff. But on game day, these kids got to be locked in. And in college, sometimes they're just not.
Yeah, I'm interested, like the things like a drinking ticket. A player gets a drinking ticket on a Thursday night, and it has to go into the head coach's office and meet with Bill Belichick. Like, he's never had to deal with that. I mean, I don't really remember. I'm sure there were some Patriot disciplinary actions that he's had to take in, but it's a different level. He's never dealt with coaching 17-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old boys. He's always had, and he's had Tom Brady, who kind of set, like you said, set the standard for professionalism and the quarterback position. We saw, I mentioned this already, but we saw kind of Mac without a quarterback this season, and we kind of saw Bill Belichick without a quarterback his last couple of years when Brady went to Tampa Bay. So quarterback is very, very important, and all eyes are on transfer portal and recruiting, and we mentioned that on the previous guest. What's going to be, I want to get, you're the pop culture, you're the media guy. What's like your gimmick in a ACC Media Day interview with Bill Belichick? Like, are you bringing out the video games? You making him drink a 40? Like, what's going to be the thing you're going to try to do to crack Belichick, or is he just not going to deal with those kind of games?
Do you really think that Bill Belichick is going to show up at ACC kickoff to do radio interviews? Do you really think that?
Are they required to do those?
No.
Okay, but he has to show up to ACC Media Day.
He has to show. He can show up to ACC kickoff to do the. I wouldn't even put it past the ACC to change the rules and change the dynamics. Like, it'd be one of those things where it'd be like, if Bill's not going to have to deal with the jabronis like Ovies and Giglio and Ross Martin on Radio Row for the Big Hitters podcast, well, then we aren't either. Okay, I'm being completely serious here.
I imagine he contracted.
Real quick, all right, I don't want to talk over you. I want you to consider this, all right? Because you know Carolina better than I do. There's a certain kind of yuck it upness that happens at Carolina, right? Mac Brown was the master of talking to the boosters. You'll never forget that Mac Brown talked about, every offseason I talk to these 6 boosters and they give me ideas and I talk to them and all this. Do you think Mac Brown's gonna? Do you think that Bill Belichick's gonna deal with that crap?
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna have to.
You think he's hanging out on top of the hill to do a radio show with Jones Angel?
I think he has to do that. Learfield, baby.
Does he? Watch what happens. Here's what's gonna happen.
I think the booster things.
We've seen it before. Coach K didn't do this stuff. They had Jeff Capel or another assistant do it. So I wouldn't be surprised if they have some sort of associate head coach. Heck, it could be Stephen Belichick for all I know, who ends up being the guy who does all the front-facing stuff that Bill doesn't have to do.
Yeah, this is what I'm super interested in. Like, yeah, I think AC Media Day, he comes and does the go up to the dais and does the press conference and the breakout stuff. But yeah, I'm sure he has to do some stuff for ACC Network, all those footage they kind of package. But yeah, Radio Row. Like, imagine him talking. I know he's going to love me saying his name, but I know you mentioned him. Josh Graham. Like, Josh Graham interviewing Belichick. I mean, think about RL in a scrum with Bill Belichick after a Wake Forest game in Winston-Salem. I mean, there's some moments of RL interviewing these coaches and players that I just think about. And Belichick's a game changer. On the donor standpoint, I think donors are going to be so enamored with him. It's like, we don't need your time. They're going to treat him like a king. The king has come to save Carolina. They're not going to, I don't know, desire and feel like they need him as much, because they're like, dude, this guy's come to win football games. That's all we need. I'm interested in how all that works.
I'm fascinated by it, and I cannot wait to see all of this unfold. I am convinced, though, I strongly feel that how we're used to doing things around here when it comes to covering college coaches is going to change with Bill Belichick. Straight up. It's not going to be the same. Bill's not going to do this kind of stuff that we're used to seeing. And it's going to be a hard time for a lot of us, and maybe even some fans, to deal with going forward.
I mean, I think Carolina fans want a winner. Winning heals everything too. So like that, that matters the most.
Winning does matter, and that's actually the thing that I thought was most curious in all the conversations that Bill Belichick has had, and his most viral moment being with McAfee. What was it, on Monday, where he talked about what he envisions. At no point did he say anything about winning. Maybe winning is the byproduct.
Yeah.
But all he ever talked about was getting guys to the NFL. That's the pipeline. Being, essentially being a spot where you will develop. And, he's trotting out ideas that, man, we've been talking about on sports talk radio 20 years ago, sports podcast today. This idea that we're not necessarily having you go through the farce of going to school. We're going to get you life skills. We're going to prepare you for what's next, whether it's in football or outside of football, media, that kind of stuff. These are ideas that have been kicked around the last 25, 30 years, man. These are not new ideas. Nor is this 400-page operational Bible that people started salivating over. I mean, please, you telling me You telling me that at Alabama, you telling me that Kirby Smart doesn't have an operational manual? I mean, the things that sometimes I do feel that we're doing a little bit of like kind of waving off some of the negative aspects of Bill Belichick in this, because we're just so enamored and so like, oh my goodness, I can't believe he's coming to college. I can't believe he's coming to North Carolina. And I'm with you on that. But I also think we have to be honest about where the conversation was around Belichick. That I asked the question, why is it that a 6-time Super Bowl winning coach, many that consider the greatest of all time, can't get an NFL job the way he wants it, right? So I think these are all legitimate questions. But in the meantime, hey man, I'm hyped. I'm hyped for the content.
I mean, how lucky are we? It could have been any program. I mean, it could have been any. There's probably 50 programs that. UNC probably 30 programs of UNC's level where they would have hired him and he would have been interested, and he chose University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, flagship program in North Carolina. Like, it's unbelievable, and I can't wait to. I mean, God, I kind of want to get back in the game. Back in the beat writing game. I mean, the Monday press. We do a Monday press conference. He's definitely not going to be as. We had Mac 4 times. We'd have him on Monday. We have him 3 times. No, you get him Monday, and then he has radio show with Jones Angel at Top of the Hill on Monday. So you get him twice on Monday, and then Wednesday on Zoom. They didn't do that last year, and then you have him after the game for like 30 minutes. And this press conferences on Monday were like an hour. Like, I wonder. It's going to be like a 10-minute. You're going to have Adam Smith driving 30 minutes from Mebane for a 5-minute press conference.
That is, I cannot wait for Adam Smith to ask him a question that's related to something that happened on the football field and a loss to Georgia Tech as a 2-touchdown favorite. And he just looks at Adam Smith dead in the eye and he says, "We're on to Syracuse." I am here for that. I cannot wait for Josh Graham to be banned from press conferences. It's going to be a glorious time.
Yeah, Adam's going to get a little high pitched and get like Mebane Country's going to come out and the gruff Bill Belichick. All right, get you out on here on this. Guys, rate, review, subscribe to the OG. Great podcast. A lot of Hurricane stuff, ACC basketball. Great stuff from Joe Giglio, Joe Ovies. All right, we did best case scenario. What is the worst case scenario? How do you see like what could go wrong in the next year or two that's like, man, we messed up and this did not work?
Okay, there's the micro and the macro. I think you know the answer to the micro. What's the worst case scenario? You know what it is.
I mean, he could leave for the NFL in February.
Nah, all this was worth it. If you lose to Dave Doran at NC State at Carter Finley Stadium next year.
Oh, that's Dave not the worst case.
Yeah, it is, because Dave is never going to let that down, man. Never going to let that down. Culture, what we've got here. I mean, he might need to go to the hospital because it's going to be over 4 hours after he beats Bill Belichick in a game at Carter Finley Stadium. It's going to be ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
By the way, I know CJ Bailey was asked about potentially playing Bill Belichick, the NC State quarterback, earlier today with some media availability. And he was hyped. He's like, "Yeah, man, I can't wait to kill him." Anybody who thinks that's, I don't even know how to present it. Anybody would want a quarterback that looks at that and goes, "Hell yeah, let's go.
Yeah.
We're going to kill him." That's the mentality you want. So please give the kid a freaking break. The worst case scenario in a macro, though, is that you basically gave Bill Belichick everything that he wanted, completely upended your athletic department to the point where it hurts basketball, by the way, because I think that's an understated portion of this. There's only so much money to go around. And it's not like North Carolina isn't already having some existential questions about what they want to be going forward. I mean, the kid who just went to BYU, I'm sure, is like setting alarm bells off at a lot of different places, not just Carolina, right? But it illustrates how things have changed in the college landscape for basketball. So there's only so much money to go around. So you've upended your entire department for this one guy. It hurt the thing that, when it all comes down to it, people love the most at Carolina, and you're left with Steve Belichick.
Yeah, the head coach at winning thing, that was weird. But look, I think we talked about this with the previous guest. Like, if he can, even that first 6 months, redo the infrastructure, stabilize things, figure out the NIL situation. Like, I just saw a tweet that UNC met his demand of $20 million in NIL from the $4 million they had last year. Like, if he can,
I'm not trying to be an ass, but like, congratulations. Like, that's what most upper end power.
That's where UNC needed to be. So like that, just getting UNC football to where it needs to be and where it needs to be seriously is could be the positive impact of that, regardless if he stays 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But yeah, it's gonna be incredible. I think GM is super important. I think hiring a GM and figuring out that, like, go steal a high level GM from a SEC program or a Big Ten program and figure that out.
He's not going to do that. He's going to hire his boys. That's what's going to happen.
I think he's got to hire some people who know how to coach in college,
we'll see.
And how to run a college program, and then he puts some touches on it. All right. Anything else? Anything else you want to say?
Nah,
Feel
man.
good about it? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm good with this. I mean, honestly, I'm shocked. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
I'm
dude, it's
shocked.
crazy.
I'll be completely honest, and I was gonna go into this on our podcast when we go live on YouTube. The way that this was framed did not sit well with me. The way this was framed, it seemed like there was this game of chicken. And yes, there was a lot of reporting. And shout out to Inside Carolina, who was the first to really put their name on it about a finalized deal being offered to Bill Belichick. But there was no board of trustees meeting at the time when everybody was being hyperventilating about that. I thought it was going to be easy once the initial Pete Thamel, Adam Schefter report came out this afternoon, that there were a bunch of sticking issues, these looming issues, including salary, NIL commitment, and all that stuff, that Bill was going to find a way out. Like, yes, I appreciate the offer. I mean, we've all been offered jobs, but that doesn't necessarily mean they offered you everything you were looking for, right? Like salary, that kind of stuff, perks, XYZ. So my theory was, yeah, UNC put it in there in Bill's court, and Bill was going to look at it and say, well, this is not everything I wanted. So I'm really curious to see how much North Carolina went all the way towards Bill to get him to do this. Or was it a matter that Bill was playing a game of chicken with NFL teams, nobody blinked, and now he's actually not stuck, but now he's like, all right, fine, I'm going to go coach at UNC.
Timing's weird with that with NFL. I mean, I guess he could get a promise from a team that's already fired their coach or that will fire their coach, but yeah, that was the kind of concern because it would make UNC look foolish. I think UNC comes out of this already looking a little, how the search was handled was embarrassing, and the board trustees and fighting with Bubba, I think, comes off a little weird. But I think ultimately they just landed a 6-time Super Bowl winning coach and one of the best coaches of all time. Yeah. All right, Joe. Guys, listen to OG. It's a great podcast. Maybe we'll have you all back on middle of the ACC season.
Let's do it.
As UNC, who knows how good they're going to be at that point. In a pretty weak conference. All right, Joe, appreciate your time, man.
It's okay because North Carolina's a football school now.
That's right.